The galaxy was vast, endless, and full of wonders that most humans could only dream of. Emily Carter sat in the dimly lit lab aboard the Starlight Voyager, her fingers flying over the keyboard as lines of data scrolled across the screen. She wasn't like the other crew members who thrived on adventure or excitement. Emily preferred quiet moments, buried under piles of information, solving puzzles no one else cared about. To her, the hum of the ship's engines and the soft glow of monitors were comforting, a cocoon of familiarity in an otherwise alien universe. Outside the observation window, stars streaked by like tiny pinpricks of light. The Starlight Voyager had been traveling for weeks now, exploring uncharted regions of space near a mysterious nebula called the Veil. It was said to be beautiful, a swirling mass of colors so vibrant they defied description, but also dangerous. Strange energy fields and unpredictable gravitational forces made navigation difficult. Yet, the promise of discovery kept the crew going. For Emily, it was a chance to study phenomena she'd only read about in textbooks. She leaned back in her chair, rubbing her tired eyes. Her dark hair was tied into a messy bun, and her glasses rested crookedly on her nose. A cup of cold coffee sat forgotten beside her. Just one more calculation, she muttered to herself, though she knew it wouldn't be true. There was always another equation, another hypothesis to test. That was the life she loved. Suddenly, the ship shuddered, violently throwing Emily off balance. Papers scattered across the floor and the lights flickered. Alarms blared throughout the corridors. "What's happening?" she whispered, clutching the edge of her desk as the vibrations subsided. Her heart raced as she hurried toward the bridge where the rest of the crew had gathered. Captain Ryan Hayes stood at the center of the room, his expression grim. Around him, officers worked frantically at their stations, voices overlapping in a chaotic symphony. "Report!" he barked, his tone sharp but controlled. "We're caught in some kind of energy field," replied Lieutenant Alex Brooks, the head of security. His broad shoulders were tense as he studied the readings on his console. "It's pulling us closer to the nebula." Emily stepped forward hesitantly. "Sir, I think I might have seen something earlier while analyzing the stellar emissions. There's something out there. Something big." Hayes turned to her, his brow furrowed. "Something? Like what?" Before Emily could answer, the ship rocked again, harder this time. Everyone stumbled, grabbing onto whatever they could find, for support. Then, without warning, the alarms stopped. An eerie silence filled the room. No one spoke. All eyes were fixed on the main view screen. At first, there was nothing but the swirling mist of the veil. But then, emerging from the haze, came a shape unlike anything any of them had ever seen. It was enormous, easily dwarfing the Starlight Voyager. Its body shimmered with hues of silver and gold, reflecting the light of distant stars. Long limbs moved gracefully through space, each step deliberate and powerful, and its eyes, two glowing orbs of molten amber, seemed to pierce straight through the hull of the ship. "It's a wolf," someone breathed, their voice barely audible. But it wasn't just any wolf. This creature radiated an aura of raw power, as if the very fabric of reality bent to its will. Emily felt a chill run down her spine, yet strangely she couldn't look away. There was something mesmerizing about it, something ancient and untamed. She didn't know how she knew, but deep down she sensed that this being was intelligent. "Everyone stay calm," Hayes ordered, though his own voice betrayed a hint of unease. "Brooks, prepare defensive measures. We don't know what we're dealing with." "No!" Emily exclaimed, surprising even herself. All heads turned to her and she flushed under their scrutiny. "I mean, maybe we shouldn't provoke it. Look at it, it's not attacking, it's just watching us." Hayes hesitated, torn between caution and curiosity. Finally, he nodded. "All right, let's try communicating. Dr. Carter, you're our resident linguist. Any ideas?" Emily swallowed hard, her mind racing. Over the years, she had studied dozens of alien languages, many of which were long extinct. None of them matched what she was seeing now, but perhaps there was a way to establish contact. She approached the communication panel, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the settings. "What are you doing?" Brooks asked skeptically. "Sending a signal," Emily replied. "A simple greeting, encoded in light patterns. If it understands electromagnetic frequencies, maybe it'll respond." For several agonizing minutes, nothing happened. The wolf-like creature remained motionless, its gaze unwavering. Just as hope began to fade, it moved. Slowly, deliberately, it raised one massive paw and tapped against the invisible barrier of the energy field surrounding the ship. Each tap corresponded to a specific frequency, creating a pattern that echoed through the Starlight Voyager's systems. Emily gasped. "It's responding. It understands." The crew exchanged stunned glances. Hayes crossed his arms, his expression thoughtful. "Can you translate it?" "I'm trying," Emily said, her fingers flying over the controls. Once more. As she deciphered the sequence, her eyes widened in amazement. "It's asking who we are, what we want." "Well, tell it we come in peace," Hayes instructed. Emily complied, sending a new series of signals. The creature tilted its head as if considering her words. Then, to everyone's shock, it let out a low growl that resonated through the ship. It wasn't aggressive, rather it sounded almost curious. "That's incredible," Emily murmured, her voice filled with awe. "It's not hostile, it's interested." Hayes rubbed his temples, clearly overwhelmed. "All right, let's get out of here before things get complicated." Brooks, plot a course away from the nebula. As the ship began to move, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter wasn't over. She glanced at the view screen last time, catching a glimpse of the creature fading back into the veil. Its golden eyes lingered in her mind long after it disappeared. Little did she know, this was only the beginning. The days following the encounter with the wolf-like creature were tense aboard the Starlight Voyager. The crew worked tirelessly to repair the damage caused by the mysterious energy field, but their minds kept drifting back to what they had seen. Whispers filled the corridors. Some feared the creature would return, while others dismissed it as a one-time anomaly. Emily Carter, however, couldn't stop thinking about it. Every night she found herself staring out the observation window, hoping to catch another glimpse of the shimmering figure. She replayed the moment in her mind, the way its glowing eyes had locked onto hers, the deliberate taps against the energy field, the low growl that seemed almost conversational. There was something about it that intrigued her, something beyond its sheer size and power. It wasn't just an animal or a predator. It was intelligent and lonely. One evening, as the ship drifted through the quiet expanse of space, Emily decided to take matters into her own hands. She gathered some tools and equipment along with a small device capable of emitting light patterns, and slipped out of the airlock for a routine maintenance check. Officially, she was inspecting the hull for microfractures caused by the earlier turbulence. Unofficially, she wanted to see if the creature, Cale Verne, as she had started calling him in her head, was still nearby. As she floated outside the ship, tethered securely to the hull, Emily activated the device. Tiny beams of light danced across the metal surface, forming intricate sequences based on the patterns Cale had used during their brief exchange. At first, nothing happened. The stars twinkled silently around her, and the vast emptiness of space felt heavier than ever. Just as she began to think her hunch was wrong, a shadow passed over her. Emily froze, her breath catching in her throat. Slowly, she turned her head and saw him. Cale Verne hovered a short distance away, his massive form outlined against the backdrop of the veil. His fur shimmered faintly, reflecting the light of distant suns. For a moment, neither moved. Then, with careful precision, Cale extended one clawed paw and tapped against the invisible barrier once more. The same sequence of frequencies echoed through the void. "It's you," Emily whispered, though no one could hear her. Her heart pounded, but she forced herself to stay calm. This was her chance to learn more, to understand why he had approached them in the first place. She adjusted the settings on her device and sent a new message. "Hello?" Kyle tilted, his head studying her intently. His amber eyes glowed brighter and a low hum vibrated through the air. It wasn't threatening, rather, it felt like a response. Encouraged, Emily tried again, this time sending a longer sequence. "I'm Emily. Who are you?" For several minutes, there was no reply. Emily wondered if she had made a mistake, if Kale would simply turn and leave. But then he moved closer, his movements fluid and deliberate. He stopped just a few feet away, close enough for Emily to see the intricate details of his fur, which seemed to shift and change like liquid metal. Raising his paw, he tapped out a new pattern. When Emily translated it, her eyes widened in surprise. "I am Kale," the message read. "Why do you speak?" Emily hesitated, unsure how to explain. How could she convey the complexity of human curiosity, the desire to connect with something so vastly different? In the end, she settled for simplicity. "Because I want to know you." Kale didn't respond immediately. Instead, he circled the ship slowly, his gaze never leaving Emily. She felt exposed under his scrutiny, as if he could see straight through her. Finally, he stopped and emitted another series of taps. "You are fragile. Why does your kind travel these stars?" The question caught Emily off guard. She thought about all the reasons humans ventured into space: to explore, to learn, to survive. But none of those answers seemed adequate in this moment. "We're searching," she replied, "for knowledge, for meaning, for connection." Kyle didn't move for a long time. When he finally did, it was to send another message. "Connection is dangerous." Emily frowned, puzzled by his words. Before she could ask what he meant, a sudden jolt shook the ship. Lights flashed inside the hull, and voices erupted from the comms system. "Dr. Carter, report back to the airlock immediately," Captain Hayes barked. "What are you doing out there?" Reluctantly, Emily deactivated her device and began making her way back to the ship. As she climbed inside, she glanced over her shoulder one last time. Kale was still there, watching her with those piercing eyes. For a brief moment, she thought she saw something flicker in his expression. Not aggression, but perhaps sadness? Back on the bridge, Hayes paced back and forth, his face red with frustration. "What were you thinking?" he demanded, glaring at Emily. "Do you have any idea how reckless that was? That thing could have torn you apart." "He's not dangerous," Emily insisted, though her voice wavered slightly. "He's curious, just like us. We can communicate with him. This isn't a science experiment, Dr. Carter," Hayes interrupted. "That creature is unpredictable. We don't know what it's capable of." "But we can find out," Emily shot back, surprising even herself with her boldness. "Captain, this is a unique opportunity. If we can establish trust with Kale, we might learn things about the galaxy that no one else has ever discovered." Hayes sighed, rubbing his temples. He clearly didn't share her enthusiasm, but he also knew better than to dismiss her entirely. Emily had a reputation for being brilliant, if a little eccentric. "Fine," he said at last, "but you'll follow protocol. No more unauthorized excursions. Understood?" "Yes, sir," Emily replied, though she wasn't sure she meant it. As she left the bridge, her mind raced with possibilities. She couldn't let this chance slip away. Over the next few days, Emily continued her efforts to communicate with Kale, albeit more discreetly. She programmed the ship's external lights to flash specific patterns whenever they passed near his location. Each time, Kale responded, his messages growing more complex. They exchanged basic information, names, origins, intentions, but it soon became clear that Kale was holding back. There was a depth to him, a weight of history and pain that he refused to share. One night, as Emily reviewed the latest transmissions, she noticed something unusual. Hidden within Kale's patterns was a fragment of a story, a tale of loss and betrayal. Long ago, his people had been hunted nearly to extinction by other races who feared their power. Those who survived were scattered across the stars, condemned to wander alone. Kale himself had become both protector and exile, driven by instincts he struggled to control. Emily's chest tightened as she pieced together the narrative. She realized now why Cale had seemed so wary, so reluctant to engage. He wasn't just a predator, he was a survivor, burdened by centuries of mistrust and isolation. And yet, despite everything, he had chosen to reach out to her, to trust her. Determined to prove herself worthy of that trust, Emily crafted a new message. "You're not alone anymore," she wrote. "We can help each other." When Kyle received it, he didn't respond right away. For hours he lingered near the ship, his presence a silent reminder of the bond they were building. Then, just as Emily was beginning to lose hope, he sent a single word. "Thank you." It wasn't much, but it was enough. Enough to show that their connection was real, that it mattered. And for the first time since the encounter, Emily allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could change each other's lives. Little did she know, the challenges ahead would test that belief in ways she couldn't yet imagine. Emily Carter couldn't sleep. The weight of what she had learned about Cale pressed heavily on her mind. She lay in her bunk, staring at the ceiling as the hum of the ship's engines filled the silence. Cale wasn't just a mysterious alien. He was a being with a tragic past, burdened by centuries of pain and mistrust. And yet, despite everything, he had chosen to connect with her, a fragile human from a tiny planet in an endless galaxy. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. What if she said the wrong thing? What if her actions led to more harm than good? But deep down, Emily knew one thing for certain. She couldn't turn away now. Cale trusted her, even if only a little, and that trust meant everything. The next day, Emily made her way to the lab, where she spent hours poring over data and schematics. She wanted to do something meaningful for Cale, something that would show him she truly cared. After much deliberation, she decided to create a device, a geyser, small emitter capable of amplifying his psychic signals. If Cale could communicate more clearly, perhaps he wouldn't feel so isolated anymore. As she worked, Lieutenant Alex Brooks entered the lab, his imposing frame casting a shadow over her desk. "Dr. Carter," he said gruffly, crossing his arms. "Captain Hayes wants to know what you're up to." Emily glanced up briefly before returning her focus to the delicate wiring in front of her. "I'm working on a project. It's personal." Brooks frowned, clearly skeptical. "Personal? You mean involving that wolf thing out there?" "Yes," Emily admitted without hesitation. "Kyle isn't dangerous. He's misunderstood. If we can help him, maybe we'll get ourselves killed," Brooks interrupted sharply. "You're playing with fire here, Doc. That creature is unpredictable. One wrong move and we're all dead." Emily set down her tools and looked him straight in the eye. "I understand your concerns, Lieutenant, but I also know that fear doesn't solve anything. Cale has shown us no hostility. All he wants is someone to listen." Brooks opened his mouth to argue but stopped himself. Instead, he let out a frustrated sigh and shook his head. "Just be careful, all right? I don't want to have to explain to the captain why you got yourself eaten by some cosmic mutt." With that, he turned and left the lab, leaving Emily alone with her thoughts. She appreciated his concern, but she also knew that caution wouldn't get them anywhere. Trust required risk, and Emily was willing to take it. Later that evening, after finishing the device, Emily slipped out of the airlock once again. This time she carried the small emitter tucked safely into a pouch strapped to her belt. As she floated outside the ship, tethered to the hull, she activated the light pattern she had used before. Within moments, Cale appeared, his massive form emerging from the shadows like a ghost. He approached cautiously, his glowing eyes fixed on her. Emily held her breath, waiting to see how he would react. When he stopped a few feet away, she carefully retrieved the emitter and held it out toward him. "This is for you," she said softly, though she knew he couldn't hear her. "It might help you communicate better." Kyle studied the device for a long moment before extending one paw. His claws hovered inches above the emitter, as if testing its energy. Then, with surprising gentleness, he took it from her hand. A low hum resonated through the air as he examined it, turning it over in his paw. Finally, he sent a series of taps against the hull, translating into a single word. "Why?" Emily smiled faintly, touched by his curiosity. "Because I believe in you," she replied, using her own device to send the message. "You deserve to be heard." For a while, Cale didn't respond. He simply gazed at her, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he leaned forward until his massive head was level with hers. Emily's heart raced as she realized what he was doing. He was offering her permission to touch him. Tentatively, she reached out, her gloved hand brushing against the shimmering fur of his muzzle. The sensation was unlike anything she had ever experienced. His fur felt warm and alive, pulsing with energy that seemed to resonate with her very soul. For a brief moment, their connection deepened, transcending words and signals. Emily felt a surge of emotions, not her own, but Kyle's. Loneliness, sorrow, hope, gratitude. It overwhelmed her, but she didn't pull away. She held on, letting him know she understood. When the moment passed, Cale stepped back, his amber eyes softening. He tapped out another message. "Thank you." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she nodded. "You're welcome." Back on the ship, Captain Hayes summoned Emily to the bridge. His expression was stern as he gestured for her to sit. "I've been getting reports about your interactions with the creature," he began, leaning forward in his chair. "Care to explain yourself?" Emily hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. In the end, she decided honesty was the best approach. "Kyle isn't our enemy, Captain. He's intelligent and he's suffering. All he needs is someone to trust him." Hayes rubbed his temples, clearly conflicted. "And you think you're the one who can do that?" "I don't know," Emily admitted. "But I have to try. If we walk away now, we'll miss an opportunity to make a difference, not just for us, but for him too." Hayes sighed deeply, his shoulders sagging. "All right, Dr. Carter, you've got my permission to continue, but only under strict conditions. No more unauthorized excursions, and you report directly to me every step of the way, understand?" "Yes." "Sir?" Emily replied, relief washing over her. She hadn't expected him to agree so easily, but she wasn't about to question his decision. Over the next few days, Emily and Cale continued their exchanges, growing closer with each encounter. With the help of the emitter, Cale's messages became clearer, revealing glimpses of his personality. He was fiercely protective, yet gentle when it mattered most. He valued loyalty above all else, but years of betrayal had left him wary of forming attachments. One night, as Emily reviewed the latest transmissions, she noticed something unusual. Hidden within Cale's patterns was a warning, a faint signal suggesting danger nearby. At first, she thought it might be a glitch, but when she cross-referenced the coordinates, her blood ran cold. Another ship was approaching, its trajectory aligned with their current position. Emily rushed to the bridge where she found Captain Hayes and Lieutenant Brooks already discussing the incoming vessel. "It's not responding to hails," Brooks reported grimly. "Could be trouble." Hayes nodded, his jaw tight. "Prepare the crew for potential engagement. We need to be ready for anything." Emily stepped forward, clutching her tablet. "Sir, I think Cale warned us about this. He senses something, someone coming." Hayes raised an eyebrow. "And you trust him?" "I do," Emily said firmly. "If Cale says there's danger, we should listen." After a moment's hesitation, Hayes gave the order to alert the crew. Meanwhile, Emily returned to the airlock, hoping to warn Cale about the approaching threat. When she emerged outside the ship, she found him already waiting, his massive form tense and alert. "They're coming," she told him, using her device to send the message. "Be careful." Cale let out a low growl, his amber eyes blazing with intensity. He sent a single word in response: "Together." Emily felt a lump rise in her throat. Whatever happened next, they would face it side by side. Little did she know, the challenges ahead would test their bond in ways neither of them could have anticipated. As the unknown ship drew closer, its intentions remained unclear. But one thing was certain: the fragile connection between Emily and Kyle was about to be put to the ultimate test. The unknown ship loomed larger on the view screen, its jagged silhouette cutting through the void like a predator stalking prey. Its design was unfamiliar, sharp angles and metallic spikes jutting out in every direction, giving it an aggressive, menacing appearance. The crew of the Starlight Voyager braced themselves, unsure of what to expect. Captain Ryan Hayes paced the bridge, his fingers tapping anxiously against his forearm as he awaited further updates. Emily Carter stood near the observation window, her hands clenched tightly at her sides. Her mind raced with possibilities, each one worse than the last. Who were these newcomers, what did they want, and most importantly, how would Cale react if they posed a threat? Dr. Carter, Lieutenant Alex Brooks called from his station, snapping Emily out of her thoughts. We need you here. That thing's energy signature is off the charts. Emily hurried over, her eyes scanning the readings on Brooks's console. He was right. The approaching vessel radiated an unusual type of energy, similar to the field that had trapped them earlier near the Veil. It wasn't natural. Someone or something was controlling it. Before she could process the implications, alarms blared throughout the ship. "They're firing!" shouted one of the officers, panic, creeping into their voice. A burst of light streaked across space, narrowly missing the Starlight Voyager. The impact sent shockwaves rippling through the hull, throwing everyone off balance. Emily stumbled backward, catching herself on a nearby railing just in time. Outside the window, Cale Verne moved swiftly, positioning himself between the two ships. His glowing fur shimmered brighter than ever, pulsating with raw power. "They're targeting him," Emily gasped, realizing the truth too late. These strangers weren't interested in the human crew. They wanted Cale. Cale let out a deafening roar, the sound reverberating through the vacuum of space. His massive body tensed as he unleashed a wave of psychic energy, creating a protective barrier around the Starlight Voyager. The incoming fire dissipated harmlessly against the shield, but the effort visibly drained him. His movement slowed, and his once brilliant fur dimmed slightly. "Who are they?" Emily whispered, her voice trembling. She turned to Captain Hayes, who looked equally baffled. "We don't know yet," he replied, his tone grim. "But whoever they are, they mean business." As the enemy ship maneuvered for another attack, its weapon systems flared ominously. This time, however, Cale wasn't fast enough. A concentrated beam of energy struck his side, sending him spiraling away from the ship. Emily cried out, her heart sinking as she watched him struggle to regain control. "No," she shouted, rushing toward the airlock without thinking. "I have to help him." Brooks grabbed her arm before she could get far. "Are you crazy? You'll get yourself killed." "I can't just leave him," Emily snapped, tears streaming down her face. "He's protecting us." Hayes stepped forward, placing a firm hand on her shoulder. "Dr. Carter, I understand your feelings, but we need to handle this strategically. We can't afford to lose you, too." Emily hesitated, torn between reason and instinct. Finally, she nodded reluctantly, though her resolve remained unshaken. If there was any way to save Cale, she would find it. Back on the bridge, the crew scrambled to formulate a plan. Using the data Emily had gathered about Cale's abilities, they devised a risky strategy. Overload the enemy ship's energy core by amplifying Cale's psychic waves. It was dangerous, but it might buy them enough time to escape. Meanwhile, Cale fought valiantly against the attackers. Despite his injuries, he refused to back down, lashing out with bursts of energy whenever they drew near. But even he couldn't hold out forever. His movements grew sluggish, and his once proud stance faltered under the relentless assault. Seeing this, Emily made a decision. Without waiting for permission, she slipped out of the airlock once more, clutching the small emitter she had built for Cale. As she floated outside the ship, tethered securely to the hull, she activated the device, sending a desperate message. "Cale, use my signal. Focus your energy through me." Cale hesitated, his amber eyes locking onto hers. For a moment, she feared he wouldn't comply, but then slowly, he extended one paw toward her. A surge of energy coursed through the emitter, connecting them in a way neither had experienced before. Emily felt her entire body tingle as Cale's power flowed through her, amplified by the device. With renewed strength, Kale unleashed a devastating pulse of energy, striking the enemy ship dead center. The resulting explosion lit up the darkness, temporarily blinding everyone aboard the Starlight Voyager. When the light faded, the hostile vessel was gone, reduced to nothing more than drifting debris. Breathing heavily, Emily collapsed against the hull, her legs unable to support her weight any longer. Kale hovered nearby, his form battered but still intact. He let out a low growl, softer this time, almost comforting. Then, with deliberate care, he nudged her gently, ensuring she was unharmed. Inside the ship, the crew erupted into cheers. They had survived, an impossible feat thanks to Kale and Emily's combined efforts. But their relief was short-lived. Before anyone could celebrate fully, another problem arose. "Dr. Carter," Brooks yelled over the comm system. "We've got incoming lifeboats from the destroyed ship. Looks like survivors." Emily's stomach sank. Survivors meant complications, questions, accusations, maybe even retaliation. Whoever these people were, they clearly hadn't come alone. Their presence would make things infinitely more difficult. On the bridge, Captain Hayes ordered the crew to prepare for boarding. "Keep your weapons ready," he instructed. "We don't know what we're dealing with." As the lifeboats docked, armed mercenaries poured onto the Starlight Voyager, led by a tall, imposing figure clad in black armor. His cold, calculating gaze swept across the room, finally settling on Emily. "You," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "Where is the creature?" Emily froze, her mind racing. She recognized him instantly. Commander Victor Kane, a notorious bounty hunter known for capturing rare and dangerous beings. Rumors claimed he worked for shadowy organizations willing to pay top credits for exotic specimens. Clearly, Kale was his latest target. "He's not yours to take," Emily said firmly, stepping forward despite her fear. "Kale isn't a weapon or a prize. He's sentient and he deserves respect," Kane smirked, clearly amused by her defiance. "Sentient or not, he's worth a fortune, and you—" He pointed a gloved finger at her. "You're coming with me. You seem to have quite the rapport with our little friend. Maybe you can convince him to cooperate." Before Emily could protest, two mercenaries grabbed her arms, dragging her toward the airlock. Panic surged through her veins as she realized what was happening. They intended to use her as bait to lure Kale into submission. Outside the ship, Kale watched silently, his amber eyes blazing with fury. Emily locked gazes with him, silently, pleading for help. To her relief, Kale didn't hesitate. With a thunderous roar, he lunged at the mercenaries, scattering them like leaves in a storm. Chaos erupted as the crew of the Starlight Voyager joined the fight, determined to protect both Emily and Kale. In the midst of the battle, Emily spotted an opportunity. Using her technical expertise, she disabled her captor's equipment, creating an opening for escape. She sprinted back toward the ship, where Captain Hayes and the others staged a daring rescue operation. Together, they managed to drive Kane and his remaining forces away, forcing them to retreat into the depths of space. When the dust settled, Emily found herself standing beside Kale once more, their bond stronger than ever. Though battered and bruised, they had faced unimaginable danger and emerged victorious. But as Emily gazed into Kale's glowing eyes, she knew their journey was far from over. Something incredible was about to happen, and she couldn't wait to see what it was. The aftermath of the battle left the Starlight Voyager in disarray. Smoke filled the corridors and the hum of the ship's engines was uneven, a reminder of the damage they had sustained. Crew members worked tirelessly to repair the hull breaches and restore power to critical systems. Despite the chaos, there was an undeniable sense of relief. Kane and his mercenaries were gone, at least for now. Emily Carter sat on the floor of the airlock chamber, her back against the cold metal wall. Her hands trembled as she stared at the faint scratches on her gloves, remnants of her struggle with Kane's men. She felt drained, both physically and emotionally, but she couldn't stop thinking about Kale. He had saved her life, again, and she owed him everything. Outside, the ship, Kale hovered silently, his massive form battered from the fight. His once shimmering fur was dull, matted with what looked like dark streaks of energy residue. Emily knew he was injured, though she couldn't tell how badly. What worried her most was the way he moved, slowly, cautiously, as if every motion took immense effort. "Kale," she whispered, stepping outside the airlock once more. "Are you okay?" He turned his head toward her, his amber eyes glowing faintly. For a moment, he didn't respond. Then, with deliberate care, he tapped out a message using the emitter. "Tired." Emily's heart sank. She had seen animals, hurt before, but this was different. Kale wasn't just any creature. He was intelligent, aware, and capable of feeling pain in ways she could barely comprehend. She couldn't let him suffer alone. "I'll help you," she said softly, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "Just stay with me." Returning to the lab, Emily gathered tools and medical supplies. She didn't know much about alien biology, but she had studied enough xenomedicine to improvise. Using the data she'd collected during their earlier encounters, she pieced together a rudimentary plan. Kale's energy seemed tied to his physical well-being. If she could stabilize his electromagnetic field, it might give him time to heal. With the help of Lieutenant Alex Brooks and a few other crew members, Emily constructed a makeshift device, a combination of her emitter and some salvaged parts from the ship's engineering bay. It wasn't perfect, but it was the best they could do under the circumstances. When the device was ready, Emily returned to the airlock. This time, Captain Hayes accompanied her, his expression unreadable. "Dr. Carter," he began, his tone cautious. "Are you sure about this? We don't fully understand what we're dealing with here." "I'm sure," Emily replied without hesitation. "Kyle trusted me enough to protect us. Now it's my turn to return the favor." Hayes nodded slowly, his gaze shifting to the massive figure waiting outside. "All right, but be careful. If anything goes wrong, we pull you back immediately." Emily stepped outside, clutching the device tightly. Kale watched her approach, his movements sluggish but deliberate. When she reached him, she held up the device, showing it to him. "This is for you," she explained, sending the message through. "The emitter. It will help." Kyle tilted his head, studying the device for a long moment. Then, with surprising gentleness, he lowered himself closer to her level. Emily hesitated only briefly before placing the device against his side, where the energy residue was thickest. The moment it made contact, a surge of light pulsed through the air, enveloping them both. Emily felt a strange warmth spread through her body, as if Kale's energy was resonating with hers. She closed her eyes, focusing on the rhythm of the pulses. Slowly, the erratic waves began to stabilize, growing steadier with each passing second. When she opened her eyes again, Kyle's fur was brighter, its shimmer returning bit by bit. "You're healing," she murmured, tears welling up in her eyes. "You're going to be okay." Kyle let out a low growl, softer this time, almost like a purr. He tapped out a single word. "Thank you." Emily smiled faintly, though her exhaustion was catching up with her. She leaned against the ship's hull, her legs finally giving out beneath her. Kyle nudged her gently, his massive head resting near her shoulder. It was a gesture of comfort, one that spoke volumes about the bond they had forged. Back inside, the ship Captain Hayes observed the scene from the observation deck. He hadn't expected this, not the connection between Emily and Kale, nor the lengths to which his crew would go to protect them both. There was something extraordinary happening here, something beyond logic or explanation, and though he still harbored doubts about the risks involved, he couldn't deny the impact Kale had already made on all of them. Later that evening, the crew gathered in the mess hall to regroup. Conversations buzzed around the room as people shared stories of the battle, their voices tinged with awe and disbelief. Emily sat quietly in a corner, sipping a cup of lukewarm tea while absently stroking the small shard of crystalline material Kale had gifted her earlier, a token of their friendship. Lieutenant Brooks approached her, His usual stern demeanor softened slightly. "You really think he's worth all this trouble?" he asked, nodding toward the window where Cale's silhouette was visible against the stars. Emily glanced up at him, her expression thoughtful. "I think he's more than worth it. Cale isn't just some wild animal. He's a being who's been misunderstood and mistreated for centuries. If we can show him that not everyone wants to harm him, maybe we can change things. For him, and for us." Brooks didn't respond right away. Instead, he followed her gaze to the window, watching as Cale drifted lazily through space. "You're taking a big risk, Doc. I hope you know what you're doing." "So do I," Emily admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. But deep down, she believed in Cale and in the connection they had built together. That belief gave her strength even when everything else seemed uncertain. As the days passed, Kyle continued to recover, his presence becoming a constant companion to the Starlight Voyager. He no longer shadowed the ship aggressively, but instead lingered nearby, almost as if he were standing guard. The crew grew accustomed to seeing him, and while some remained wary, others began to view him as a protector rather than a threat. One night, as Emily stood on the observation deck gazing at the stars, Cale appeared beside the ship. His amber eyes met hers through the glass, full of quiet understanding. They didn't need words anymore. Their bond transcended language, rooted in trust and mutual respect. But then something incredible happened. Without warning, Cale shifted closer to the ship, his massive form shrinking rapidly. Within moments, he had transformed into a smaller, less intimidating version of himself. His fur still shimmered, and his eyes still glowed, but his size was now manageable, almost human-like. Emily gasped, rushing to the airlock. When she stepped outside, Cale greeted her with a gentle nudge, his new form radiating warmth and familiarity. She reached out tentatively, her hand brushing against his fur. It felt the same, alive, pulsing with energy, but somehow gentler, more approachable. "What did you do?" she whispered, her voice trembling with wonder. Cale tapped out a message. "Adapted." Emily's eyes widened as the realization hit her. Cale had changed himself, not because he had to, but because he wanted to stay with her. With them. A wave of emotion washed over her, leaving her speechless. Captain Hayes arrived moments later, his jaw dropping as he took in the sight of Cale's new form. "Is this permanent?" he asked, clearly struggling to process what he was seeing. Cale sent another message. "For now." Hayes exchanged a glance with Emily, who nodded firmly. "Then we'll make it work," she said, her voice filled with determination. "We'll find a way to keep him safe. Together." As the crew adjusted to this unexpected development, a new chapter began. Not just for Emily and Cale, but for everyone aboard the Starlight Voyager. The galaxy was vast and unpredictable, but with Cale by their side, they felt ready to face whatever came next. Little did they know their journey was far from over. Across the stars, whispers of Cale's existence spread, drawing the attention of forces both curious and dangerous. But for now, in this fleeting moment of peace, Emily and Cale stood side by side, united by a bond that defied logic and expectation. The transformation of Cale Viren changed everything aboard the Starlight Voyager. His smaller form allowed him to move more freely around the ship, and though his glowing fur and piercing amber eyes still commanded attention, he no longer inspired fear. Instead, the crew began to see him as part of their team, a silent guardian who had proven his loyalty time and again. Emily Carter spent nearly every waking moment with Cale, helping him adjust to life aboard the ship. They communicated through the emitter she had built, but over time they relied less on devices and more on instinct. Cale's growls, gestures, and even the subtle shifts in his energy became a language all its own, one that only Emily seemed able to fully understand. Captain Ryan Hayes watched their interactions with growing curiosity. At first, he had been skeptical of allowing an alien creature, let alone one as infamous as Cale, to stay so close to his crew. But as days turned into weeks, it became clear that Cale posed no threat, If anything, his presence brought a sense of calm to the ship, a reminder that even in the vastness of space, connections could be forged where none seemed possible. One evening, as the Starlight Voyager drifted near the edge of the Veil Nebula, Emily stood on the observation deck with Cale by her side. The swirling colors of the nebula painted the room in soft hues of blue and purple, creating an almost surreal atmosphere. She leaned against the railing, lost in thought, while Cale rested his head near her shoulder. "What happens next?" she murmured, not expecting an answer. "Do we keep exploring, or do we find you a place to call home?" Cale let out a low hum, tilting his head slightly. It wasn't a question he could answer easily, not because he didn't know, but because he wasn't sure what he wanted. For centuries, he had wandered alone, driven by instincts and survival. Now, for the first time, he had found companionship and purpose. Before Emily could dwell on the matter further, alarms blared throughout the ship. Red lights flashed overhead, and voices erupted from the comm system. "Captain, we've got incoming vessels," Lieutenant Alex Brooks shouted. "Multiple signatures approaching fast." Emily's heart sank as she rushed to the bridge, Kyle close behind her. On the main view screen, a fleet of ships appeared, each marked with the insignia of various galactic factions. Some were scientific organizations, others military forces, and a few represented private interests. All of them had one thing in common. They were here for Cale. "They must have heard about him," Captain Hayes said grimly, his hands gripping the back of his chair. "Word travels fast." "What do they want?" Emily asked, though she already knew the answer. These groups weren't interested in understanding Cale or forming alliances. They saw him as a resource, a weapon, or a prize to be claimed. "They'll try to take him," Hayes replied, his voice heavy with resignation. "And if they can't, they'll destroy him." Emily turned to Cale, her eyes wide with panic. "We can't let them get to you." Cale growled softly, his amber eyes blazing with determination. He stepped forward, positioning himself between Emily and the view screen. It was a protective gesture, one that spoke volumes about his resolve. He wasn't going to run, not this time. "Dr. Carter," Hayes began, his tone firm but gentle. "We need a plan. We can't fight off an entire fleet." "I know," Emily replied, her mind racing. Then suddenly inspiration struck. "Wait, that's it. Cale's energy field. If we amplify it enough, we might be able to create a shield strong enough to repel them." Hayes frowned, clearly skeptical. "That's risky. What if it backfires?" "It's our best shot," Emily insisted. "Kyle, trust me. I can guide him." After a brief hesitation, Hayes nodded. "All right, do it. But everyone else needs to prepare for evacuation routes just in case." With Cale at her side, Emily hurried to the lab, where she reconfigured the emitter to sync with the ship's power systems. The device would act as a conduit, channeling Cale's energy into a massive protective barrier. It was a long shot, but it was all they had. As the enemy ships drew closer, their weapon systems flared ominously. The tension aboard the Starlight Voyager was palpable, but Emily remained focused. Standing beside Cale, she activated the emitter, sending a surge of energy coursing through the ship. Outside, a shimmering dome enveloped the vessel, pulsating with light and power. The first wave of attacks hit the barrier, dissipating harmlessly against its surface. Cheers erupted from the crew, but Emily knew they couldn't celebrate yet. The fleet adjusted their tactics, launching coordinated assaults designed to overwhelm the shield. Each strike weakened it slightly, forcing Cale to pour more of his energy into maintaining it. Emily felt the strain radiating from him, his body trembling with effort. She placed a hand on his side, offering what little support she could. "Hold on," she whispered. "Just a little longer." Cale growled softly, his amber eyes meeting hers. In that moment, Emily realized something incredible. Cale wasn't just protecting himself, he was protecting her, the crew, and the fragile bond they had created together. His strength came not from anger or fear, but from love, for connection, for trust, for belonging. Finally, after what felt like hours, the fleet relented. Their weapons exhausted and their patience worn thin, they retreated into the depths of space, leaving the Starlight Voyager unharmed. As the last ship disappeared from view, the shield flickered and dissolved, plunging the area into silence. Emily collapsed to her knees, tears streaming down her face. Kyle nudged her gently, letting out a low rumble that sounded almost like a sigh. Around them, the crew cheered, their relief echoing through the corridors. But the victory wasn't without cost. Kale's energy reserves were nearly depleted, his once bright fur dimmed to a faint glow. Emily wrapped her arms around him as best she could, holding him close. "You did it," she whispered. "You saved us all." Kale tapped out a message weakly. "Together." For several days Kale rested, his body slowly recovering under Emily's care. The crew pitched in too, bringing food and supplies, ensuring he had everything he needed. Though he rarely interacted with anyone besides Emily, it was clear that he appreciated their efforts. A newfound respect had blossomed between him and the humans who had risked everything to protect him. When Kyle was finally strong enough to move freely again, the crew gathered in the mess hall for a celebratory meal. Laughter filled the air as stories of their recent adventures were shared. Even Captain Hayes cracked a rare smile, raising a glass in toast. "To teamwork," he said simply, "and to unlikely friendships." Emily sat quietly in a corner, watching as Kale moved among the crew, his presence accepted and welcomed. She felt a deep sense of pride, not just for herself, but for everyone involved. They had faced impossible odds and emerged stronger because of it. Later that night, as the ship prepared to jump to hyperspace, Emily stood on the observation deck once more. Kyle joined her, his amber eyes reflecting the distant stars. "Where do we go from here?" she asked softly. Kale tilted his head, considering the question. Then, with deliberate care, he tapped out a message. "Forward." Emily smiled, her heart swelling with hope. Together, they gazed at the endless expanse of space, ready to explore the mysteries of the universe. What lay ahead was unknown, but one thing was certain. Wherever they went, they would face it side by side. As the Starlight Voyager leapt into hyperspace, Emily felt a profound sense of peace. Something incredible had happened, not just to her, but to all of them. Kale, the galaxy's most dangerous alien wolf, had become more than a protector or a companion. He had become family. And so their journey continued, a testament to the power of trust, courage, and the unbreakable bonds that transcend species, worlds, and galaxies.